for the Warriors. Can you believe what you have just seen?
G'day and welcome to the Game Day Squad Rugby League Fantasy Show. I'm Dyl, that's Stu, and we are the Fantasy Bros. We've partnered once again with Game Day Squad to bring you all you need to know to succeed in this season's Rugby League competition. Stu, welcome back, mate. I hope you've had a great off-season. How's it been treating you?
Yeah, g'day, Dyl. G'day, everyone. Thanks for watching on YouTube or listening on Apple or Spotify. Dyl, in the Game Day Squad space, there isn't much of an off-season at all, is there? You and I were both heavily involved with the Oz Cricket fantasy season. That's just wrapped up, and we're straight into the Rugby League team previews. It does not rest when you're a Game Day Squad fan or you're a fantasy bro. So, yeah, the off-season, if you want to call it, was about 2 or 3 days. And in that time, we obviously went back to work as well. So the plate is piling up, but the Game Day Squad and Fantasy Bro commitments do not rest. I'm as excited as ever and cannot wait to rip into the rugby league season.
Yeah, 100%, mate. As you said, well, off-season just doesn't happen. Look, we've been busy behind the scenes, even during the Oz Cricket season. We've been flat out with some rugby league prep. So really looking forward to this rugby league season. I know we've got a lot happening this season, and no doubt we'll talk about it throughout this show and all the rest. Look, let's get into things. What can our viewers expect from us across this preview as well as a few of the others over the next few weeks?
Yeah, Fantasy Bro regulars will recognise our sort of pre-season schedule where we preview all of the rugby league teams. We look at all of the ins and outs, the things that might make some teams a bit more relevant or lose some relevancy. We'll look at the positional changes from last season and the impact that might have on clubs. We'll talk a bit about the prime time and the Sunday Showdown, 2 new exciting competitions that's going to increase everyone's chances of scoring some awesome cash and pack prizes. So we'll pinpoint some of the teams and players that are going to be most suited to those special comps. And then we'll sort of talk about the few players that we're going to target across teams, or maybe tell you not to target because they could be traps or could be easy ways to anti-pod and go against them at least early on anyway. And of course, every episode, there's going to be about 4 or 5 of these preseason episodes, and we're going to finish all of them, as always, with a pack opening. It wouldn't be a Fantasy Bros show without opening some packs, and the viewers are going to have an excellent chance to win some fantastic packs. And just quietly, Dyl, if your rugby league pack opening luck is anything like your fantasy cricket pack opening luck, then the viewers are going to be in for some special prizes, aren't they?
100%. Look, just if you want to go back and watch that final episode in particular of the Oz Cricket series, where the last pack, the last card that was opened was a legend. So great way to finish that. Look, as always, new users, welcome. Great to see you. Awesome to be here and helping you out this season. Welcome to Game Day Squad. There's plenty of time for those people that have just stumbled across our page and this video to jump on and sign up. If you sign up now, use the promo code FBRL26. Let the boys know that Fantasy Bros have sent you, and they will give you 3 by 9 player common packs to start off your squad. Along with that, you're going to get plenty of bronze starter cards or starter packs to help that NRL starter squad, as well as that classic with some of those common packs. You can get all range of cards in those packs. So plenty to get involved with in the start of the preseason and into the first few rounds. As Stu mentioned, there's also the Fantasy Bros Sunday Showdown, the massive new competition. We will be Sunday as well to preview the Sunday Showdown, where that competition will solely be players that are playing on that Sunday or the Monday, if there are Monday games as well. So it's another awesome addition to an unreal season already from Game Day Squad. All right, mate, let's jump into it. This episode, we are going to preview the Brisbane Broncos, the Canberra Raiders, the Canterbury Bulldogs, and the Cronulla Sharks. Do you want to start by reminding everyone how the Broncos went last season? They obviously had a massive season, and then some of their primetime and Sunday fixtures, as well as looking at the under 24 players and then that player movement as well.
Absolutely, mate. Let's get into it. Yeah, gee, weren't they good at the back end of the 2025 season? You can see there on screen. They finished 4th on the ladder, but obviously were unstoppable in the final series, despite a few teams sort of looking like winners after 60 or 70 minutes. But the Broncos still had enough in the tank to win those crucial matches. And they, of course, went on to win the grand final in pretty stunning fashion there. And a couple of blokes that really stood up there toward the end of the season that didn't do as good at the start of the season and left a few coaches pretty frustrated. But, geez, if the Broncos start this season like they finished last year, they're going to be tough to beat. So they won 15, they lost 9. But what's really special about this side is that they're going to have 12 games during the primetime slate. What that means is the special comp running just on Thursday and Friday. So we might have 2 or 3 games during that time. The Broncos feature in 12 games. So just about half of their games played will be during that primetime competition. So if we can nail some of these Broncos selections, they'll go a long, long way to winning coaches some awesome cash and pack prizes before the weekend even really starts. You can see there as well that because they've got so many primetime games on Thursday and Friday, we're only going to see them twice during that FantasyBros Sunday Showdown. So just 2 games on the Sunday, but that just means we can wait a little bit longer to get our Payne Haas's or Reece Walsh's involved in those special comps. We're going to have the under-24 special comp as well, which will be super exciting, and we'll spend a bit of time, talking about some key players that will be eligible for that competition as well. Some of the names that stand out are obviously Reece Walsh, Ezra Mam, Xavier Willison, and maybe Blake Moser if he gets a run at all during the season. And not too much in the ins and outs department for the Brisbane Broncos. Grant Anderson and Tom Duffy join the Broncos from the Storm and Cowboys respectively. Probably just depth pieces at this point in time, but we know that the injury toll in the origin period certainly can wreak havoc in the NRL. So you wouldn't be surprised to see them get a start at some point. Selwyn Cobbo obviously departs, and the Raiders pick up a pretty promising young half in Kobe Black. And the last little talking point, some notable role changes. Not too much going on at the Brisbane Broncos, apart from Benny Hunt, likely to get a lot of time at number 9 following that devastating injury that Billy Walters suffered late last season. But that just means Reynolds, Mam, and Hunt can be on the park at the same time, and that's a pretty special combination there for the Brizzy Bronx, the premiers from 2025.
Yeah, let's start with talking about Ben Hunt and his potential role. We sort of had a chat earlier today, and you suggested to expect maybe Billy Walters out in majority of the season. Is that sort of where you see that tracking, and then Ben Hunt obviously taking on that major role in that hooker position for the Broncos?
Yeah, look, the ACL rehab is getting better, is improving. There's never really a time frame that works for everyone. It can be a lot longer than expected for some, or some can come back a lot sooner than expected as well. So, look, Billy Walters will do everything he can to get back on the park, because he was actually playing some pretty decent footy there throughout the season, and he'll want to be part of this squad as well as they look to go back to back. But look, the Brisbane Broncos aren't losing anything. If anything, they're gaining, aren't they? Having Mam, Reynolds, and Ben Hunt on the park. It'll just sort of come down to one of those older boys in Reynolds or Hunt. If they do get an injury that is longer than 2 or 3 weeks, that their depth in the halves or the hooker position or the utility position could be tested. In which case, Billy Walters returning toward the end of the season might be a blessing in disguise for them. But I think they're in a pretty good situation without Walters if Hunt and Reynolds can keep fit.
Yeah, the thing I like about Ben Hunt is his numbers when playing at hooker last season. He had a few games there, and he averaged 50 GDS points in base and power. So that is tackles, run meters, and tackle breaks. And that's a great little stat there. The stat that sort of detracts from that is that he missed almost 3.5 tackles per game when at hooker, which is pretty consistent with a lot of other hookers. We talk about those demerits, and they are pretty heavy in terms of game day squad for negative points there. The downside for me for Ben Hunt is he's only available in half in game day squad. So I think that's going to be quite tough to find a spot for him in your side most weeks. I feel like coaches might look at him potentially on that primetime slate where there's less opportunity, there's less options in the half, and it might take someone like Ben Hunt where his floor and ceiling are probably going to be pretty similar. They're probably going to stay around that sort of 50 GDS points, so you know what you're going to get from Ben Hunt. He's probably not going to be involved in a lot of the playmaking or anything like that we would find from any other normal half. So I think that's probably a safe play, maybe in that prime time, rather than looking at him as a super pod in that half position. Are you sort of thinking something similar?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely becomes a pod during that prime time slate. A lot of coaches probably gravitate to the Adam Reynolds type, but we've seen how dominant Benny Hunt can be, particularly when he wears a maroon jersey, and the Broncos jersey isn't too dissimilar in colour. He's had some of his biggest games in his career, obviously, for the Maroons. He'll certainly be someone on my radar. If he's certainly if he's getting 80 minutes for the Bronx, that's the big telling point. I think if he's playing hooker and getting close to near enough 80 minutes, I think he'll be a solid pick and certainly a pod that not a lot of other coaches will go for.
Yeah, for sure. And look, someone that isn't a pod from the Brisbane Broncos is the man that really dominated the back end of the tournament, the back end of the competition, and that's Reece Walsh. He obviously just comes in for the under 24 eligible players, and he is actually the top of the list for all averaging under 24 players for the season. Across the regular season and the finals, he's averaging almost 60 GDS points for all of those competitions. What makes it difficult is that they've got the primetime games, they've got the full slate of games, and he's available for the under 24. You're looking at potentially 4 or 5 Reece Walsh cards that you're going to need for the whole weekend's competition, because it's going to be really hard to leave him out of your side at all, particularly if he continues the form that he finished last season in.
Yeah, so some coaches will be looking at the higher rarity versions of Reece Walsh if they can. They'll be wanting to get plenty of golds and platinums to maximize just how many points he's contributing to their teams. Obviously, in those competitions where salary cap is important, we want to be looking at spreading the salary around, but prioritizing some of those key players that are going to have those massive ceilings. And we saw Reece Walsh put on 5 back-to-back 100 GDS point scores, which is just incredible. He's probably not going to do that again, or probably certainly not at the start of the season, but you don't want to miss one of those matches where he goes absolutely nuts and does tip over that 100-point mark, and you've only got like a silver or a gold version in one of those salary cap competitions, because the rest of the competition is going to surge right past you. We've all seen what he can do. He'll do it at some point this season, maybe not as frequently or as soon. But look, putting plenty of salary on Reece Walsh is going to be a fantastic play by coaches. So if you're someone that's sitting there browsing through your current inventory of players and you can only see 2 or 3 Reece Walsh cards, now's the time to swoop. The transfer market is full of cards. Coaches are trying to clear the decks and get some packs with all of the new players. You can get some Reece Walsh cards pretty cheap, or you can throw up some trades for some as well, because I tell you what, that price is going to surge during the season if he finds some form similar to that from last year.
Yeah, and look, just to put it into perspective, from round 24 all the way through to round 24 all the way through to the finals, he averaged 100 GDS points per game. But on the flip side, all the way back in round 2, he had a massive negative 7.87 GDS points in that game through demerit. So that's obviously showing his absolute floor and his absolute ceiling. Let's just hope that he doesn't start the season like he did last year. Mate, out of the rest of those under 24 players, or anyone else from the Brisbane Broncos side, is there anyone in particular that you're looking at stocking up potentially, or making sure that you've got cards, whether it's the prime time or the FantasyBros Showdown?
Yeah, I think because they dominate the primetime slate just about, on average every second week, really. I think you want to get the gun Broncos players as soon as possible. The blokes like, Katoni Staggs that always get the job done. Paddy Carrigan, obviously, are guys that, don't jump out in terms of these huge monster scores, but are always sort of safe and can get the job done, particularly in some positions that are a little bit tricky as well. I think Xavier Willison is certainly someone to watch, and maybe not right on at the start of the season, but certainly through the origin period. He's just absolutely growing, not just in size, but in experience and in ability as well. Yeah. Just the 37-point GDS average, but look, that doesn't look too good on the surface. But we got to remember he played a lot of games off the bench and limited minutes, but he made some impact when he came on the field and when he had a bigger opportunity. So he's going to be someone that could surprise some coaches. And because we can play him during that primetime competition, he's eligible for the under-24 comp. I think he's going to be someone that a lot of coaches are scrambling to pick up pretty soon as well. So there's another one from me. If you can jump on the transfer market and see some Xavier Willison cards available for cheap, pick them up. I think he's going to be a pretty good play, at least through the origin period as well, when the numbers are tricky anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Look, the last bloke on that list is Blake Moser, and you touched on very briefly. We potentially see him in maybe that utility role that we've seen Corey Pakes play previously. And if Blake Moser just come in, he's an unreal talent. Look, he's currently not in the GDS player pool at the moment, but if named on that bench in that utility spot, I think he will get a start there and he will get into the player pool. So just keep an eye out for that. Any updates can happen through Discord. So if you're not involved in the Discord, make sure you jump onto the Game Day Squad Discord, where the boys, Cal and Tom, update as often as possible regarding those player pool changes. So yeah, just one to keep an eye on, and maybe having a look at some of the preseason trial team lists and see where they play Blake Moser for sure. Mate, is there anyone else that you want to discuss, or should we move on to the next team?
Let's move on to the next team. I think the Brisbane Broncos, they won the comp last season. A lot of GDS coaches are going to be smarting to get a number of them into their inventories. So we know the guns there from the Bronx. Let's talk about some of the other teams in the competition, eh?
Before we do, though, let's talk about two individual players and have a look at two of the players that we either really like or we're interested in the upcoming season. Mate, do you want to kick us off? Who's your one player that you've got to focus on from the Broncos?
Yeah, my apologies. Jumped the gun slightly there. The Bronx were getting too much airtime for my liking. I'm just itching to get to the next team because guess what? They're probably going to be my favourite team. Yeah, look, I'm going to make this one nice and simple for GDS coaches, maybe first-time listeners, maybe some people just getting into rugby league for the first time. Those that have played GDS for a long time or been watching rugby league forever don't need me telling them that Payne Haas is the benchmark forward in the entire competition, but he's a really easy one for coaches. If they don't have a lot of Payne Haas cards, now's the time to start getting him as well. Look, his scoring profile is so elite that he's just about immune to game script and context. No matter what is occurring during the game, if it's raining, if the Broncos are winning by 1,000, if they're losing by 40, he's immune to that, and he can still pump out massive scores, and he doesn't even need big minutes to do so. Last season, he averaged 72.89 GDS points through 21 games, and that came from just elite workload. 34 tackles and 166 run meters per game means that you're getting 50 points before you add in any offloads, any tackle breaks, or any tries. And he's that big that he loves to break tackles. He offloads at will, and he's got one man called Reece Walsh backing him up through the middle, and that's just a lethal combination, isn't it? It's those extras. It's the tackle breaks and the offloads that separate him from the other true workhorses in the competition, because he threw 64 offloads last season. He broke 116 tackles. So that just gives him absolute genuine ceiling. He doesn't need tries, and he can still out-average just about any single player in the competition. And he only needs 50 minutes on the park to do so. 65 to 70 in a tight game is just absolutely GDS gold, but you'll be cheering if he's on the park for 50 minutes because he's still going to get you a nice solid score. Don't overthink it. Payne Haas is going to be that genuine number one candidate for loading up your salary in those comps like Contender or Classic. So get the golds, get the plats, and make sure you've got enough to cover all of those Broncos matches.
Yeah, and as we've already said, you could enter up to 6 competitions this year each weekend, so you want to have 4 or 5 cards of each player for sure, and Payne Haas is definitely one of those at the top of the list. Look, someone else that I'm looking at and that I'm pretty keen on is Shibasaki. And look, if we roll back 12 months, he was virtually an unknown, and I think we spoke about going back that time where you said there's a little whisper around this bloke Shibasaki might make the starting side for the Broncos, and then look at what happened, 12 months later. He helped secure the State of Origin victory and then went on to win the premiership as well. So an unreal effort from a bloke that, just like I said, was virtually an unknown. Look, as a result, across all of those games, he ended up averaging 46 GDS points last season, which has him ranked 6th for centres. So it's not too bad in terms of what we expect in return from a centre. We've got our elite centres, obviously, and Herbie Farnworth. Val Holmes was quite an elite centre last season as well. But Shibasaki, I think, was someone that sort of went under the radar a little bit. He wasn't really someone that we turned to and looked at a lot, but I really like the way that he got to his 46 points. He finished slightly behind his teammate Staggs as well. How the Shibasaki was able to assist more tries and score more tries compared to Staggs, who was his centre pairing, obviously. Shibasaki also ran more meters. He ran 500 more meters than Staggs. And look, when we look at meters and the points that you can gain from meters, it is 1 point every 30 meters run. So that's a significant portion of his statistics made up from those meters gained. And look, at the end of the day, when we break it down, we talk about the base and power. So meters run, tackles made, and then tackle breaks, as well as a few other metrics depending on the player. But those two centre pairings have really similar base and power, but it's all about Shibasaki's upside and then that ability to limit his demerit points, which is super important in GDS compared to other competitions. Those demerit points from missed tackles, from errors, from penalties conceded can really hurt your score if they stack up. And Shibasaki was able to limit that quite a lot last season. He played some really good footy and he was able to secure the footy quite a lot. Look, he's going to have plenty of primetime games. So Shibasaki really might be that one centre that we look at quite often on a Thursday or Friday night when we are looking at that primetime competition. He may even factor in as the season goes on to someone that we look in that long form across the whole weekend in a full round competition where we can play 2 centres, potentially 3 centres. I think Shibasaki might be one to keep an eye on and see if he can improve on some of those numbers. Particularly the try scoring is really what I'm keen on, to see a positive regression from him in the try scoring area.
Yeah, just incredible to see what he actually achieved throughout that season. And he started hot and everyone thought he'd sort of, fall off because of his, his recent history in the competition, but he just got better and better and was unreal for the Queensland Maroons. And then throughout the final series as well. During the regular season, Tony Staggs only out-averaged him by 0.8 points, which is almost nothing. Yep. Tony Staggs, when you say play a Broncos centre, you're just going to think about Staggs and pop him in if centres have a good matchup for the Bronx. But look, Tony Staggs, Gemmet Shibasaki, both really good options there. But Shibasaki, more tries than Reece Walsh during the regular season, more line breaks, more tackle breaks as well. So you're talking about someone who's outperformed Reece Walsh in those categories. You can't just put a pencil or a line through him. He's got to be a genuine option moving forward if he can continue that same form, hey?
Yeah, definitely. So load up on your Shibasaki cards as well. Look, that brings us to the end of the Broncos preview. We've talked quite a lot here. We're going to move on to your favourite team, the Canberra Raiders. So, Stu, I'll let you do the honours again. How did they go last season? What are we looking at in terms of special competitions? Any major changes in role or personnel at the club?
Yeah, well, a lot of people that claim themselves to be elite NRL tipsters or insiders had the Raiders finishing bottom 4. A few of them even had them coming 17th. So the boys in green, Ricky's men, set up yours to just about everyone that doubted them. They finished first by the end of the regular season. And look, they started awesome. They were defending really well, scoring points. And you just felt the wheels are going to fall off at some point. This club don't have any standout players. They're all sort of getting in and getting the job done. They're working hard for each other and they're grinding out victories. And they did it all season long. And it took a magical Reece Walsh, probably 2 or 3 moments in that semi-final to let the Broncos progress and get a week off, which was so important for them. And then, the Raiders were just a little bit out of gas after that and went out pretty meekly against the Sharkies there in the semi-final. But this team was special. They've only really lost Jamal Fogarty. He obviously was extremely pivotal for them. He steered them around the park himself. Not super flashy, not as good as the other halves in the competition, but his kicking game was outstanding. He knew how to get his outside back, his speed men and his edge players into the game. And I think the Raiders are really going to miss him. His experience, his level-headedness is really tough to replace. So it's going to take a couple of seasons, I think, for Ethan Sanders, maybe Kobe Black to really get into that position. So I don't think they'll be as strong in terms of that leadership and that go forward through Jamal Fogarty. Massive loss, but look, this side had a whole heap of youngsters last year. All that experience is going to be so much better for them. They won they won 19 games and only lost 5 of them. So I think they're still going to be a final side, top 8 side. But their premiership window might have closed slightly, but it's still ajar because they haven't had too many outs other than Fogarty. They do get Jaden Brayley as well, probably just a depth piece. I'm not too sure what the thoughts were around signing him. We've obviously got Tommy Starling, Owen Paddy there, who are outstanding in that hooker combination last season. And the exit of Jamal Fogarty obviously means that Ethan Stranger's role now obviously changes. He's probably going to get the footy in his hands a lot more. So that left side of the field, if he does stay there, is going to see a lot more footy. He should get a lot more kicking meters. He'll get that last tackle option so many more times than he did last season with Jamal Fogarty there. It's just a question over whether he swaps sides with Ethan Sanders if Sanders does start in the number 7 jersey alongside him. Sanders does have that elite left foot kicking game, which might make sense to put him down that side of the field. In which case, it might make some of the Raiders' left-hand players a little bit less appealing. But we can certainly break that down throughout the preseason and then during the regular season as well. In terms of special competitions, the Raiders feature just the 7 times during prime time on Thursday, Friday, 8 times on Sunday for the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown. So we get a little bit of a mixture there, 7 and 8, pretty nice spread. But it's the youngsters at the Raiders that are really appealing as well for that under 24 competition. We got KO Weeks, Xavier Savage, Ethan Strange, Ethan Sanders, even Matty Nicholson sneaks in there as well. So a lot of players that are only getting better, and last season is going to do a hell of a lot of good for these guys.
Yeah, I think the big one for me is that the loss of Jamal Fogarty, and we joked about last season that Jamal's going to be the first one to kick 1,000 meters in a game, and losing that I think is a big out. And as you say, there's going to be some kicking shared between both the Ethans, but it's just going to be interesting to see how that plays out and what that means for GDS scoring as well. We relied on Jamal Fogarty so often because of those base stats, because he had such a long kicking game and was able to easily get 500, 600, 700 meters in a game, that we were really relying on that as part of his base stats. And then anything on top of that in terms of attack was just absolute gold. But yeah, it's just going to be really interesting to see where they go with that. You're sort of looking at potentially Kobe Black coming into the side as well. Where do you sort of see that playing out? Are we going to give the Ethans maybe 6 weeks to see if they gel and then look at Kobe Black to come in? Or do you reckon Sticky's got sort of long-term plans there as well?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think Ethan Sanders will get the first opportunity, but it's really difficult for young halves as well. If it's not working, it's really easy to go elsewhere and look for someone else. And if Kobe Black does get that opportunity after 6 to 8 weeks, or even a slight niggle or an injury and Sanders misses a game or two, look, Kobe Black is good enough to keep that spot and make that his own. If anything, it's a really nice signing from the Raiders. And to cause a little bit of a positional battle between those two youngsters is only going to be really healthy for the long-term prospects of that club. But yeah, look, I expect Ethan Sanders to be there. They knew that Fogarty was leaving and Sanders was going to be the man to replace him. Kobe Black was only signed, a lot later in that piece. So hopefully that's just a depth or a see what else we've got there. Sticky might have some plans for how to use both of them at times throughout the game. It might be a master stroke as well, if anything happens to Owen Paddy or Tommy Starling. Really exciting prospects. But, I think we'll just have to wait and see how things play out.
Yeah, for sure. And look, let's have a look at the under-24 players. And the first one that jumps out of me is the young bloke, KO Weeks at fullback. He had a pretty good season last season. He ended up on an average of 44 GDS points, which includes the finals and the regular season as well. But it was probably those games where the matchup really suited the fullbacks. And we're talking about teams like the Dragons, who allowed plenty of points to fullbacks. We're talking about teams like the Panthers, who allowed plenty of points. In some of those games, he was having 180-point games. So there's definitely an upside there for KO Weeks. And I feel like he's looking at every now and then to maybe pair up with the Reece Walsh. We've got a few options there at the fullback wing centre spot, but I feel like that pairing of KO Weeks and Reece Walsh might be quite a good pairing that we see quite often throughout the season when it comes to the under-24 competition.
Tell you what, he really impressed. He probably exceeded expectation as well, particularly mine. Watching him play a little bit at Manly, wasn't too excited to see him come across to the Raiders, but gee, he was good in patches, and that experience again as a young player only going to be even better for this year. Broke 107 tackles, the most at the club, even more than Reece Walsh during the regular season as well. So I'm going to have that comparison a bit throughout these team previews because we all know how good Reece Walsh was. But when this man is breaking more tackles, you get 3 points per tackle break, which is outstanding. He's not afraid to cut the ball up. He'll do it all day. Look, I'm really excited for him, and I think that's a dynamic prospect to pair him up with Reece Walsh on a prime time. If the Raiders have a nice matchup and you think there's going to be plenty of points involved, if it's going to be free-flowing open footy, that's certainly a game that KO Weeks is going to capitalise.
It is interesting that you talk about the free-flowing open footy. If you just cast your mind back to Magic Round last season, in the absolute pouring rain, the last game of the round up against the Storm was where he had one of his better games of the season. It was absolutely bucketing down for half of that game, and he came out and had an absolute blinder. He ended up scoring 70 GDS points in that game, but he was the difference maker in that for the Raiders to get up, and that was an unreal atmosphere to be at in that last game. So yeah, if you want to check out what he's really made of, go back and have a look at that game. Is there anyone else in particular that you're looking at, either for the prime time, the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown, or that under 24 competition?
No, I don't think so. I think you and I are going to talk about some key players from our minds shortly. One of those men is going to be Ethan Strange. So if you don't have anything else to add and you want to jump into that more detailed analysis of those two players, I'm keen to do that as well.
Yeah, so let's jump across and have a look at a couple of relevant players, as you said. And Ethan Strange, obviously, is the top of the list for those relevant players. We've talked briefly about his role change and what it means. Talk us through why you think he's going to be one of the best in the Canberra Raiders this season.
Yeah, it's just that his value obviously has to take a clear step forward, given the exit of Jamal Fogarty. It's as simple as that. Fogarty was the organising half. He was the dominant half. He got the ball probably on 94% of last tackle options, and either roofed the ball downfield or kicked it nice and high to a winger, and got plenty of kick meters or try assists from the corner. A lot of that, or at least a lot more, is now going to go to Ethan Strange, and obviously not the same sort of kicking game as Jamal Fogarty, but it has to increase. Ethan Sanders isn't going to pick up 500 to 600 meters of kicking each game. It's going to be shared a lot more evenly, and 200 to 300 kick meters isn't out of the realm of possibilities for Ethan Strange, and that's pretty easily an 8 to a 10 point increase just because of what he's doing on the fifth tackle. Then add in all of the opportunities that he can get with, little grubber kicks in behind or kicks to the corner to set up some try assists, or even when he runs it himself or has a dart close to the line. That ball was getting passed off the deck to Fogarty more often than not, where he put that little grubber through, he'd throw the cutout pass or have a go himself. A lot of that's now going to be on Ethan Strange's shoulders. So his average of 41 last season, I can't see it being any worse than that. So it's got to go upwards. He still has a really solid base for a half. He makes plenty of tackles. He gets through plenty of run meters because he is a ball running half. He loves to take on the line, and he's got some pretty big boys around him that he can put through gaps or get offloads from, and he uses his pace and his footwork as well to get through the defense and then around the fullback. So, yeah, I think he's going to be in the game so much more. His fitness is going to need to improve to ensure he doesn't get injured or cramps late on in the match. But yeah, I can see his run meters going through the roof. His kick meters will as well. And naturally, tackle breaks, line breaks, etc. are sure to rise as well. Like I said, it is a wait and see to see whether he lines up on the left or right. We'd love to see him pair up with Hudson Young on the left again. That combination was dynamic, not just for Ethan Strange, but for Hudson Young as well. Scored plenty of tries thanks to some creative brilliance from Ethan Strange. But I guess we'll have to see. It doesn't mean his value is ruined that much, Ethan Strange. If he does go to the right, he's still going to run the ball a lot. If anything, he might be a little bit more comfortable out there on the right anyway. So I see him building into the role. He might not be someone that you play as frequently or as early on as some of the other established halves, but I certainly see during that origin period, or if the matchup suggests plenty of points, he's going to be one of those first halves I look at playing because he's got the upside and the ceiling that not many others have.
Just quickly, before I talk about Corey Horsburgh, have we had any indication from the Raiders who might be taking the kicking tee as well?
Yeah, no, we haven't. Strange did have a few kicks last season. They've got a few options. KO Weeks has kicked before. Sanders himself does kick. But look, if Kobe Black is breathing down his neck and Ricky wants, Sanders just to focus on his game in the number 7 jersey, gee, if Ethan Strange gets the tee, he might not slot them all, but they all count, don't they? You don't get any demerits in GameDay squad for missing conversions.
You don't.
Gee, let's look at the trials. If he walks out with the tee to kick that first conversion, I think a lot of us are going to be racing to the app and slotting him into our halves position. Yeah, gee, that's tasty, isn't it?
For those new to GameDay squad scoring, as Stu said, you do not lose points for missing a goal, and for every goal, it is 3 points. So we are used to our goal kickers getting 3 or 4 goals per game, upwards of that, then there's an easy sort of 9 to 12 points on top of whatever base and attacking stats that potentially Ethan Strange might have. So that could be a really juicy option moving forward. I think another juicy option for a lot of coaches is going to be Corey Horsburgh. And look, Horse comes into the season with probably a similar role as he did last year, playing through the middle. I guess the difference is going to be that he's probably got that lock role down pat, I think. Whereas last season we saw him come out, play quite a bit of prop as well. But really his minutes didn't diminish either way, really. He sort of had that same amount of minutes in both sort of roles that he played. But look, last season, Horsburgh finished with an average of 48 GDS points, which came about due mostly to an average of 43 in base and power. When he did start at lock, his increase in minutes really helped him increase that base and power as well. He increased to 54 minutes on average on the park at the lock roll, and then his base and power increased to 46 GDS points as well. The downside is probably that when you compare him to someone like Joe Tarpany playing in the middle as well, Tarpany did score more tries. Look, Tarpany's base and power was down slightly compared to Horsburgh. Tarpany's base and power was only 43. But like I said, more tries. He did finish with 5 extra tries compared to Horsburgh, which meant that his Tarpany's average was slightly increased due to that. What is interesting, though, is Tarpany hasn't scored that many tries in the past 5 seasons. That's the most he's scored going all the way back to 2020. So I think Horsburgh there potentially might have an opportunity to overtake Tarpany as going to be one of the dominant middles in this Raiders team. And look, we saw one game last season where Horsburgh was on the park for 70 minutes. And if we can see some of that fitness again, although he does love a good chicken nugget and a red wine, if we can see some of that fitness and sort of getting upwards of 55 to 60 minutes, I feel like Horsburgh is going to be one of those really nice pods that we look at based on the matchup, based on potentially the prime time or the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown, where we don't have a whole lot of options. And I feel like going to Horse might be a great little play in this season, and someone who I think might be a bit of a surprise packet, as long as he can make sure he limits those demerits. We have seen him get a little bit hot-headed at times and does give away a few penalties that are pretty silly. So if he can sort of rein that in a little bit, I think he's going to be an excellent play moving forward throughout the season.
Yeah. Gee, he's someone that excites me as a Canberra Raiders fan. He just plays with so much pride, so much passion. He's going to rip in, even when things get tough and they're behind on the scoreboard and, time's ticking away. He's usually that man rolling his sleeves up and still carrying the ball, twice a set, looking for an offload and still making plenty of tackles to finish the match. He had plenty of matches where he made, above 40 tackles. Yeah. And that massive 70-minute game against the Panthers toward the end of the regular season there was outstanding. And it shows that he does have a motor against, one of the best teams in the competition. And he went at still about 1 point per minute in that increased workload. So he's definitely capable. And if Stick just wants him out on the field for longer because of what he brings to the club, just do it, mate. We love Corey Horsburgh. We love his points per minute. Just not getting enough, a lot of mid 40-minute matches. Then it spikes to high 50s and you go, all right, we're in here for a 60-minute game. And then it dips back to, 43 and 48. It's a bit all over the shop. A little bit of consistency there might mean Corey Horsburgh is a bit easier picking our sides, but with so many good middle forwards that have a little bit extra try scoring upside. I think Horse's try came in the very last game of the regular season. Look, he's always on the fringe. He's always an option. Just want the minutes to be around that 60 plus. That'll be absolutely gold.
And I guess the other concern probably is if there's any sort of injury to one of those middle forwards as well. Horse has gone into that prop role and has played up front quite a bit. It also means Matty Nicholson, that's sitting on the bench probably at the moment, he just sort of can slot into that role quite easily as well. So, yeah, there could be a few different options that Sticky might use where Horsburgh's value might decrease slightly. But I think, if he maintains that lock role and he can get upwards of 60 minutes, I think he's definitely a look at a pod for sure. Moving into this season. Alrighty. Anyway, let's move on. That's enough for the Raiders, mate. I think we've talked plenty about the Raiders.
Not enough.
Let's move on to the Bulldogs. And Stu, once again, do you want to run through their season in 2025 and then what we're looking at for 2026?
Yeah, we're just going through clubs in alphabetical order, but we've certainly started pretty hot, haven't we? The Canterbury Bulldogs were a pretty good side last season, finishing third on the ladder, making the semi-final. They did really, really well and look to get even better this season. Despite losing Reid Marnie, he didn't get too much of an option toward the end of the season there. He was sort of, his role was really reduced at the back end there, and he only seeing 20 to 30 minutes off the bench when they were looking for a new direction, a hooker that could do a little bit more than sort of just shovel the ball off the ground. So Reid Marnie, look, is a decent name. I think the Cowboys are going to benefit with his signing, but not too much in terms of the out departments. They have signed Sean O'Sullivan from the Dolphins as a bit of a halves depth piece. Leo Thompson could be really good for them as well. The Canterbury Bulldogs forwards get better and better every season under Cameron Ciraldo. Wouldn't surprise me to see Leo Thompson become, not just a thug and an aggressor, but someone who can get through plenty of work and get this pack rolling forward. So he'll be a name to look out for sure. Primetime, like the Broncos, plenty of competition, plenty of primetime matches for these heavyweights in the competition. The Doggies get 14 games on Thursday and Friday, so let's make sure we got plenty of Bulldogs cards ready to roll out. Sunday, unfortunately, a bit like the Bronx, equal least with the Broncos, only the 2 games on Sunday. So we're going to have to make do with what they can get done for us on Thursday and Friday. And one really exciting name there in the under-24 eligible players in Lockie Galvin. Harry Hayes, I think he's a little bit more special in your eyes, in your heart. And maybe you can tell viewers or remind viewers why that's the case shortly. And just a notable role change. Obviously, Bailey Howard is a flow-on effect there of the Reid Marnie exit. Hayward looks like he's going to get a lot more time at the hooker position. Whether or not he's able to run and create as well from that position remains to be seen. If he's just going to be a tackle bot in the middle there, it's not going to be too exciting. But if the Dogs can use his sort of speed and his creativity there and be a little bit more than what we saw from Reid Marnie throughout the season last year, I think he could be a pretty exciting name, not from the get-go, but certainly at some point during the season.
Yeah, Harry Hayes is definitely someone that is probably more special in my eyes than anyone else. He led me to victory last season in the GameDay Squad Cup, the first iteration of the head-to-head elimination competition that Cal and Tom organised off the platform, and I was the first inaugural GDS Cup winner, which was a great victory for me up against our good friend JT, and it was all Harry Hayes, who was listed as a winger on GameDay Squad last season, was playing on the edge and through the middle for majority of the season, and unfortunately, look, I tried to convince you to put him down in the notable role changes, but you wouldn't have a bar of it. Harry Hayes, unfortunately, has gone to the edge on GameDay Squad, so I think its value has significantly declined. Coming off the bench, more than likely, he probably doesn't have a role like he did last season, but that's okay. Look, I got the best out of him, and as a result, I have some pretty good memories of the GDS Cup. Look, that other player that you talked about, Lockie Galvin, obviously had that mid-season shift from the Tigers over to the Bulldogs. He's now probably had a pretty good off-season. He's settled. He's ready to have a massive season ahead of him. I feel like he's going to be one player in particular that we are going to spend a lot of time targeting. Is that someone that you're trying to get a hold of? Do you have plenty of cards for him? And what do you think he's going to do in 2026?
Yeah, mate, we've got to remember he's still only 20 years of age, and that's just incredible for the development and the growth that he's been demonstrating. He's just been fantastic in his time in the NRL, and he's only getting better as well. Maybe eventually going to move into the lock forward position. We'll have to wait and see. But look, he's commanding a lot of football in his hands in the halves position, and his average of 40 points isn't, I don't think, going to be a true reflection of what we can see from him this season. There's obviously a lot going on behind closed doors, like you said, at the West Tigers there. It was a bit of an odd sort of farewell and then a start at the Dogs. He was coming off the bench, found a home there on the right-hand side, and look, a full preseason there alongside, listen to it, Jacob Preston, Stephen Crichton, Jacob Carraz. There's probably not an edge in the competition that's as damaging on their day as those three. Lockie Galvin is going to get all the benefits of pairing up next to those three. And we got to remember, he's got such a good running game as well for a young half. He's got the body for it. He's so creative with his kicking game as well. He'll pop up on the left-hand side of the field. He's going to be a guy that we talk about for a long, long time. And he's still eligible to play in that under-24 comp for at least another 3 or 4 seasons. He's going to be a big feature in that competition this year, as well as our primetime teams, as well as maybe every chance during our regular weekly team as well, given the development that we're probably expecting from him. Do you see him still projecting in an upward trend, or has he reached his peak already? What do you think?
No, I think he has. And I think if, you break down the first half of his season, last season with the Tigers, and then the second half with the Bulldogs, I think there was some clear differences. It started to have that really settled role. And it wasn't probably till the back end of the season where he really started to benefit from that. In fact, it was one of their last games of the season, or it was their last game of the season, up against the Panthers. He scored 68 GDS points, which was the most for him that season. So it took all the way to one of the last games for him to really show out what he can do. He also had some games of around 55 to 60, which shows probably that true nature of what he can do in GDS. And that's sort of where I think he probably lies, in around that 55 to 60 mark, where, like you said, you just have to look at who's outside of him and what they can do. And no doubt we're going to talk about a couple of those players soon, but their side is looking very good. And I think between him and Matt Burton, I think they're going to have plenty of opportunity to have some big games. And I think he's going to be a big part of that. And as you said, he's going to factor into probably at least 3 out of 6 teams almost every week, between primetime, FantasyBros Showdown, and then the under-24 as well as potentially in that main slate across the whole round. So I'm really excited for what Lockie Galvin can bring. And I really hope that he, especially up against the Tigers, he just absolutely gives it to them. I can't wait to see that.
That matchup with his old team is certainly going to be spicy. Mate, who else do you like from the doggy side in terms of the primetime competition? We're going to see them a lot Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
Who are you going to be looking to plug in as often as you can?
Yeah, someone who we sort of talked about quite a lot last season was Maxi King, and he had some really unreal standout games, and then he also had some low games. And I just want to see what his role looks like again this season through the middle. It's someone that I really relied on to have quite a consistent output most games that he did play. We also saw him, as a result, have that call up to the Origin arena. So I feel like if he can come back just as strong, I feel like he might be someone that we look at in the prime time. And then obviously the 2 blokes that we're going to talk about in a minute, who sort of at the top of the list when we filter the stat center by Bulldogs players and we look at average scores, and that's Jacob Preston and Jacob Carraz. Those 2 blokes are just probably on another level, particularly in their position. So let's jump across and have a chat about those. First, do you want to talk us through probably maybe the best edge in the competition for GameDay squad in particular, in Jacob Preston?
Yeah, if not, certainly one of the most reliable edge forwards in GameDay squad due to his workload on both sides of the football, really. He averaged 57 GDS points last year, making 37.6 tackles a game while still contributing about 100 run meters as well. That's not too dissimilar to Payne Haas's base numbers was that we spoke about that earlier, being 50 points. And when you add all that up, that's 47.6 for Jacob Carraz. The big difference, for Jacob Preston. The big difference, obviously, is that he's an excellent line runner and he can find the try line as well. He scored 11 tries last season. And I think that combination with Lockie Galvin is going to improve. There's every chance he builds on that 11 and we could see him scoring, 14, 15, 16. That certainly wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. When the Dogs are rolling and they're making half breaks down the left-hand side, it often shifts over to the right and Preston's line running can just bump off that half and score himself, or he sort of has a one-on-one with the fullback, draws and pass, and there's a line break, there's a tackle break, and there's a try assist as well, and the points can come pretty quickly. So, yeah, look, when the Dogs are rolling, they can score points all across the park. And sometimes it's to Stephen Crichton and Jacob Carraz's detriment that Jacob Preston steals all the points. So if you're worried about that and you're not too sure about if Jacob Carraz is going to find the try line because of how good that edge is inside him, then you just roll out at least Jacob Preston as well because, look, he's going to be super safe. He'll get through plenty of tackles. He's so durable, hardly ever seems to get injured. And look, when he has a big attacking day, he can rival the top scorers in the competition just because of that workload and the upside with the ball in hand. So, yeah, look, if he's fit, he's probably going to be in as many teams as possible. Yeah. I'm just glad I've got plenty of his cards, and there's a lot of people chasing some diamond Jacob Prestons for those higher tier competitions, as well as his all-star card. That's probably the one card I don't have. Anyone listening, jump into my DMs, please. If you do have a Jacob Preston all-star card, I'll make it worth your while, I promise. Have you got one, Dyl?
I don't have an all-star. I do have a diamond of Jacob Preston. I wasn't able to get an all-star, but I do probably have one of the best all-stars from the 2025 season, but we'll leave that for another preview. Look, yeah, the thing that I like about him is that try-scoring ability, and the bloke that I'm going to talk about in Jacob Carraz is probably his downfall is that he doesn't score enough tries, and look, compared to Jacob Preston's 11, Jacob Carraz only scored 9, so there's not very often that your edge forward is outscoring your wingers in a team, but Preston just has that ability, and he's had that ability for the last couple of years. You know, we've talked about his want and need to get to the footy, whether it's in his hands to bust over the line or chasing down a grubber or a kick to get to the line, and it's great to see. He'll hopefully continue that in 2026. But look, the player that I'm keen on is Jacob Carraz, and I know a lot of you sitting there who have followed the Fantasy Bros last season will be thinking, why is Dyl not talking about Connor Tracy? No, just kidding. Yeah, look, Jacob Carraz, he ended up finishing as the highest averaging winger last season with an average just under 50 GDS points. And for me, the most impressive part was that try scoring or lack of try scoring record. As I said, when filtering GDS stats for wingers by try scoring, Carraz's 9 tries doesn't even make it inside the top 20 wingers across the competition. It was, I think, 9 tries had him somewhere down in like almost the 30th for wingers, which is unbelievable to see. Look, it tells me the majority of his points has come from base and power that we love to talk about. It means it's a consistent game that he plays. The other thing that I love, look, from that base and power, he averaged 180 running meters per game. And the amount of times that we saw him running off the back fence after a kick's been put down the field and he's either taken the catch or he's got that first run, either from half or off the play the ball. It's great to see that he's backing up and wanting to get his hand on the footy. The other thing I like is that he was making over 5 tackle breaks per game as well, and then 3.5 offloads per game. And in fact, the offloads is where he probably had the bulk of his points scored. He ended up with 61 offloads for the season, which is almost double the next best winger, which is unreal. And I think we talked about some players before in the forwards that had around 60 offloads as well. So a winger offloading the ball that many times is just some absolute gold. He doesn't necessarily need that try scoring, but look, if we want to project Carraz to have some positive regression with the try scoring and hopefully increase that 9 to maybe the 15 this year, I think that's just going to be absolute gold alongside those base and power stats that we've talked about. I think he can far exceed the 50 or the 49 GDS points that he ended up with in 2025.
Yeah, I think he's allergic to playing the football. He just absolutely hates getting tackled and getting up and having to roll it back behind him. He's more than happy just to toss it out the back. Usually it goes to hands. He does have a couple of, some brain snaps there where you see the coach throw his head in his hands because it's a pretty poor offload coming out of their own end. But look, it's obviously part of the game plan, and he makes he's really hard to tackle. Obviously, he's still driving his legs forward. The players can't wrap him up, and then he just pops that ball out the back. And yeah, that's fantastic for our game day squad point scoring. If we have a look at his stats, he actually, was pretty good in the first half of the season, and then his second half season numbers slipped away a little bit, and he dealt with a number of sort of minor injuries and particularly a foot sprain and an ankle issue that didn't necessarily keep him out of too many games, but it certainly had an impact on his go forward and on his power as well. So look, if he's got a good full preseason under his belt, if there are no lingering side effects of that foot injury, if he's good to go and that power is back, yeah, I think those tackle break numbers, the offloads are going to go up, and then naturally you'd have to think the tries go up at some point as well. There's no way that a team that can be as good as them on their day and score plenty of points, that a dominant winger on their dominant side of the field isn't going to score, come on, give us 14, 15 tries at least. You might not get 20 like some of the other wingers, but 9, not good enough. Yeah. Come on, boys.
Yeah, let's get him over the line. Alrighty, that brings us to the end of the Bulldogs preview. We've got one more team to look at today, and that is the Cronulla Sharks. Stu, for the last time, do you want to take us through the Cronulla Sharks?
Yeah, Cronulla Sharks did end the season of the mighty Canberra Raiders. They finished 5th on the ladder. They made that prelim final. They were always a good side. We just didn't think that they were a great side and a chance of matching it with the really top teams in the competition. That ended up being obviously the Bronx, the Panthers, the Melbourne Storm. Still 15 wins and 9 losses throughout the season. They were pretty fortuitous during the Origin period, not missing too many players at all, and were able to get a lot of wins through that period. And what's really surprising, what's really unique about this side is, no, that's not a typo on the right-hand side, guys. The player movement, the key ins and the key outs, it's none. This is the most settled team in the competition. And you've got to think that that's a good thing. They don't have to change combinations. They don't have to, establish new partnerships or relationships on different edges of the field. It's, other than some long-term injuries that aren't going to take the field to start the season, it's wheels up for this side. And they've had, the last 12 months preparing for this season because they haven't had to worry about any of these positional changes. We're going to talk about some of the important role changes throughout the next 15 minutes as well. Sammy Stonestreet and Jesse Colquhoun are big role change notable players. We're going to see if that's going to be a positive for them or a negative. We'll get to that in a moment. But in terms of the special competitions, we'll see them a little bit on Thursday, Friday, just the 4 games for them during prime time. We'll see them on Sunday quite more frequently. We'll see them 10 times during the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown, which might spill across to a couple of Monday fixtures as well. Sammy Stonestreet and a really exciting young gun, Liam Ison, that I write a little bit about in the FantasyBros Rugby League textbook that I'm sure you'll give our viewers a little bit more information about maybe later on in this show and then closer to release date. Liam Ison, an exciting young prospect. And if he can get on that team sheet, Will Kennedy is sort of, nearing the end of his career. They want to look in a different direction. Ison could be that long-term number one. And I don't even think he's got a card in GameDay squad yet. So that'll be a name for the future. But Sammy Stonestreet, probably one key player there to look out for in the under-24 competition.
Yeah, definitely. And look, a player that I'm really on for this season, particularly for the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown, where they feature 10 times, but also throughout the season, I think as well, we saw him just have an unbelievable first half of the season when he went to 9 or 10 game try scoring streak across that first part of the season before he came to injury in round 14. He did turn in the back end of the season, round 26, but he just didn't quite get to the heights that he had in that first part of the season, where he had games of 90, 73, 60 GDS points. He ended up as one of the top averaging centres in the competition on 53 GDS points for the regular season. But that doesn't include the finals competitions as well, where in the finals he went 27 points against the Roosters, 63 against the Raiders, and 66 against the Storm. So as a centre that is averaging almost 50 plus GDS points each and every week, I think he's someone that we definitely got to keep an eye on and definitely got to get into our sides when they are playing on that Sunday Showdown for sure.
Yeah, he was outstanding, wasn't he? And it would have been amazing to see if he didn't suffer that injury, how many games in a row he could have gone through with scoring. But someone I think it was just as impressive for the Sharks. They had a bit of a breakout season. In fact, more than a breakout season. It was Blake Brayley, wasn't it? He became, probably the most talked about name on a FantasyBros live preview show, particularly talking about the hooker position. It was move aside, Harry Grant. It's all about Blake Brayley, and that was because his running game opened up. It sort of drifted off toward the end of the season, but if the Sharks are doing any sort of film review and looking at where their success came from, it was off the back of just how good he was after a nice quick play of the ball from some of their big forwards. And he was getting occasionally over 100 run meters per game, and he was turning that into line breaks, tackle breaks, line break assists, tries, and try assists. And he just reignited that football side, and they looked fantastic every single time he picked up the ball and ran. It's got to be part of their game plan moving forward as well. And if we see any sign or any indication of that, look, Blake Brayley is going to be a heavily played side in plenty of my teams. And do we think he's a chance of a sky blue jersey this year?
Yeah, we did talk about it a little bit last season as well, alongside Reece Robson. And I think there's potential for Blake Brayley to maybe take that off Reece Robson. Look, I'm going to spoil a little bit. We're not going to do a ranking show this season. All of our rankings are going to be found in that Fantasy Bros textbook that we will talk more about a little bit later. But I can tell you that Blake Brayley is one of the only hookers that we've got in our top 10 forward rankings for the season. We think that he's going to be one of the best in the competition for sure. And as you say, that is off the back definitely of all of those particular statistics. But the big one for me was his limited missed tackles. We talked about it all season where people like Harry Grant and others were just falling off tackles, and it was really costing them some big GDS points, where Blake Brayley, I think he finished the season on about 98% tackle efficiency, which is just unheard of from that hooker role where you're making 40, 50 tackles per game. So that's where I think his value lies, in his ability to just make those tackles and keep sticking to those tackles. So yeah, all aboard the Brayley train again for me this season. And just quietly back to that the key ins and outs. Look, I was talking yesterday with a Raiders fan about how good the Sharkies are looking this season and the potential, I think, understated fact of how great it is just to go into a preseason, not having to learn who's inside and outside of you and how good that's going to be for their chemistry. And this Raiders fan thought I was absolutely bananas. So they bet me $200. And I don't promote gambling, everyone out there, but a handshake bet for $200 that the Raiders were going to go above the Sharks at the end of the regular season. So I'm going to keep a close eye on those two there for you. Alrighty, let's jump into our two players that we should or shouldn't be looking at this season. So, Stu, I'm going to get you to kick us off with Sam Stonestreet. I think he is someone that we potentially could be looking at as playing throughout even at least the first part of the season.
Yeah, he certainly is. And for anyone wondering, I'm not that Canberra Raiders fan that bet Dyl, by the way. Sammy Stonestreet. He's a ceiling centre wing whose output is entirely dictated by his attacking opportunity. And I think he's going to get a lot more of that this season because of that notable role change. We saw him average 30 points last year, mostly lining up on the right-hand wing when Sione Katoa was out injured. And his points mostly came through attacking stats. He had really low base for in comparison to, your key base-getting wingers like Brian To'o, Jacob Carraz. Nothing similar to them whatsoever. But his rate of games per tries was pretty high, 11 games played, I think, for 9 tries, which was pretty excellent. But the big thing for me is that we're very likely to see Sam Stonestreet line up on the left wing now outside Kaoliro. And you spoke a lot about how damaging he was. And he was able to get a bit of an offload and a pass into his game late on in that season. He was sort of running himself, and maybe that was a reason why he was scoring a lot of tries himself. But he was certainly able to get Ronaldo Mulitalo into the game a lot more last season. And when the Sharks made a half break down the left, it was normally because Ronaldo was streaming down that wing. So poor Ronaldo's done his long-term injury there with his ACL. So that opens up a spot there for Sam Stonestreet. And he's going to take full advantage of that Sharkies left-hand edge. And when Kaoliro is amongst the points, you know that Sammy Stonestreet is going to be right there as well. He's going to score plenty of tries. If he gets a full season, a 20-game season, we can probably expect him to score, 16 to 18 tries, which is obviously going to be an excellent improvement in his overall score. But his floor is pretty poor, and that's the one big risk that we do need to factor into this. A lot of coaches that rolled the dice and played Ronaldo Mulitalo last season, would have had probably two feelings after the 80 minutes were up. One of sheer elation because he scored 2 tries and made 3 line breaks and a big 60 or 70 point score. Or, one of sheer disappointment because the tries were all scored elsewhere and he only got 1 line break. He missed 2 tackles, made an error and ended up sub 20. That's just the nature of wingers who don't have a lot of workload. That's Sam Stonestreet. But I think he can score plenty of tries. And he showed last season that when he can find the line, he can sometimes find 2 as well. He scored a handful of doubles. And I think this left edge is going to score more tries than the right. So it's a great role change. And someone will need to pay close attention to. If the Sharkies have a nice matchup, like they do in round 1 with the Gold Coast Titans, can we get to a Sam Stonestreet in round 1 when no one else is going to be looking at him? And then we're laughing to the top of the leaderboard. I'm not sure I can get there myself. But I certainly see that average of 30 rising pretty nicely throughout this season.
Yeah, I think that the big thing for me is we've got to look at the average for all wingers last season, and that was 36.8. So I think if he's able to produce numbers above that, which we fully expect that to happen, I think then that's the key. If he can be above that all average of 36.8 or around that 37 mark, then I think it's going to be a decent return on investment there. The hard part is playing those games and not knowing necessarily which games are going to be those down games. Like we saw plenty of times for Ronnie. I think I played Ronnie every time he had a poor game and missed him every time he had a big one, which is just a classic game day squad play from me. Look, the player that I think is really interesting is Jesse Colquhoun, and he shapes as an option. I'm not necessarily certain he shapes as a genuine option, though. He's earned that starting lock role for the Sharks, we think, based on Cameron McInnes also recovering from that ACL injury. I don't know what the Sharkies were doing at the back end of last season, but a couple of ACLs, unfortunately, for those two blokes. And look, coaches may be licking their lips at Colquhoun in this new increased role, potentially, in what we think is going to be a pretty much unchanged Sharks side for 2026. However, I'm really proceeding with a bit of caution here. Having a look at last season, he took over the lock role from round 24 after McInnes had that injury, and he had that until the end of the finals campaign. Across those 5 games, Jesse Colquhoun averaged 34.2 GDS points, and that was all from base stats. Yeah, I think he had 1 missed tackle in those games and 1 or 2 tackle breaks, but everything else was tackles and meters gained. The concerning thing, though, for me is this lack of time on the park. Across the 2 regular season games and then the 3 finals appearances he had, Colquhoun averaged only 43 minutes on the park. However, he couldn't muster that 1 point per minute that we really want to see from those blokes going into that lock role. And there's quite a few options that we have with those that play lock that do have that 1 point per minute return at least. If his minutes increase, I think then potentially we take another look at him. But at this stage, if he's going to continue that trend of those 40 to 45 minutes of game time, it's just someone that I'm not keen on. And I know a lot of coaches will be looking at that role. It's just not someone that I'm going to be able to trust this season until I can see some other evidence otherwise. And we talk a lot about their forward rotation. We talked plenty last season about Aden Fanua-Blake and his decreased role in the side. He was still able to produce some decent points across the season. I just don't see that Jesse Colquhoun is that same player. And for that reason, I'm probably going to go elsewhere when we have those primetime or the Sunday Showdown games for someone like Jesse Colquhoun.
Yeah, his numbers certainly don't jump off the page. And I think you're certainly warranted to be a little bit hesitant in seeing just how much of a role he will have. But there are a few ticks in his favour. He has just recently signed that 4-year deal with the club, and there was some whispers around a number of clubs were trying to poach him, and that's why the Cronulla Sharks locked him up for the next 4 years. So they obviously see a lot of development, a lot of growth in him, and they're certainly going to make sure that they can get the best out of him, particularly while Cam McInnes is off the field. He actually sustained his own ACL as well partway through the 2024 season. So maybe we can say that 2025 was somewhat impacted by his return to footy after a long layoff, and maybe fingers crossed, an injury-free preseason here for 2026 has his fitness up, and maybe we can see him pump out a bit more PPM, and maybe the coach thinks that he can spend a bit more time on the park. So they're all, question marks, and we have got to wait and see. But I think there are a few things in the positive column for Jesse Colquhoun. If we're not seeing enough minutes, then yeah, he just doesn't have that upside to score enough points with limited time on the park. But yeah, look, it wouldn't surprise me if he eventually gets 50 to 55 to start with, even up to 60, and spending plenty of time in that number 13 jersey, he could become an option. But yeah, certainly something that we'll have to wait and see.
And I think that's probably the positive of the Game Day Squad platform over other platforms is we don't have to commit to him before the start of the season, because we can clear our teams each and every week, and we've got the additional competitions that we can play. There's plenty of time to just have a look at how he plays and how he performs and how many minutes he does get before we do make the decision and pull the trigger on someone like Colquhoun. So I think that's a real benefit, that we do get some time to sit and watch before we go ahead and make any decisions regarding playing him. Look, that is it. Thank you, everyone, for sitting through our first four team previews. It's a lot to digest, a lot to take in, but hopefully we've helped you potentially with some options for not just the full slate of games, not just the full round, but also some of those special competitions as well. Look, don't forget, you can still sign up. There's plenty of time to get involved. Before we do that, though, we are going to open a pack, and we love opening packs on the show. We love giving away plenty of cards. It is really easy to get involved. I'm going to open a 9-player unique pack, and any players that we open that were from the 4 teams for today are going to go straight into the giveaway pool. Does not matter what rarity they are. If they are a legend, well, tough luck for us. They are going straight into that giveaway pool. Unreal way to begin the season for sure. So if we see any Broncos, Dogs, Sharks, or Raiders players, they're going straight in. The best thing for you to do is to comment who you think the MVP of the show is. And that's not between Stu and I. That is the MVP for the season from those 4 teams. You might want to comment one from each of the teams, whatever it is. You get one comment, like the video, subscribe to our YouTube page, and it is easy as that. You are in the running for any of the cards we pull from now until the beginning of the season. We will be drawing all winners on our first live round preview, and I believe that is on the 4th of March. Before the big kickoff of the competition. So plenty of opportunity. I think, as Stu said, we're going to have about 6 preseason shows. So you should have about 6 opportunities to get involved across our preseason shows. So without any further ado, let's jump in and open a pack. Hopefully we get some unreal cards today. Just bear with me. I'm just going to jump across to my packs. Alrighty, as a player unique, good luck all. Let's see if we can get some.
Come on, let's go.
Real cards. That's what we want.
Oh, I like that. Let's load up some red.
Before it takes some time loading, so let's start. With a Ma'u to begin with. That's a Doggies player going straight in. Blake, I'll come back to the diamond. We've got a Kai O'Donnell. We've got a Jesse Arthurs from the Broncos. That's going into the player pool. Oh, we've got a second. We've got 3 diamonds. Harry Hayes, my man, going straight into the giveaway pool. All righty, let's get some diamonds. And Fanua Blake diamond. That is massive.
Wow, that's big.
Wowee. How good is that? Good going pull. Straight into that giveaway pool. We've got a Vai and a Docker Clay to finish off. So we've got Fanua Blake diamond. We've got a Ma'u plat. We've got a Jesse Arthurs plat, and we've got a Harry Hayes plat already in the play pool. So some unreal cards. Once again, all you need to do is into the comments, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, comment who your MVP is from those first 4 teams. Make sure you like and subscribe across all of those platforms, and you are in the running to win. Don't forget as well, if you are new to the platform, make sure you download GameDay Squad app or head to the website GameDay Squad. Signing up using the promo code FBRL26, you're going to get 3x9 player common packs. Again, similar to what I just did, you can open those. You might get anything from silver all the way through to a legend, and each of those have a different multiplier that will add your score up and might mean that you win the round because of those salary pods. Don't forget as well, we are going to have the textbook releasing very soon. It is the preseason guide to everything Game Day Squad Rugby League. So make sure you keep an eye out on all of our socials for release. I believe it's going to be releasing about mid-February. So make sure you get hold of that. It's going to be absolutely essential leading into the start of the season. Our team preview shows drop every Tuesday and Thursday, so make sure you like and subscribe across YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify, as well as subscribing to all of our socials to keep up to date at FantasyBros AU. So that's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Apple Music, and Spotify. As I just said, TikTok as well. We're going to be releasing plenty of shorts throughout the season to keep you up to date in the short form as well. Thank you very much for joining us, Stu. As always, it's been a pleasure. Make sure you catch us on the next team preview where we go through the next 3 teams. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Dyl. Catch you next time, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode by the Fantasy Bros. If you want to show your support, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this show on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Also, make sure you check us out on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search at FantasyBros AU.